Well, good morning once again, FCF. We're in Philippians chapter 3. We left off at verse 16 yesterday, where Paul was talking about, his pursuit of spiritual growth and development and how intense it was and how all those that are mature, they're going to be doing likewise. He's going to continue with that thought in verse 17. He says, "Join with others in following my example, brothers, and take note of those who live according to the pattern we gave you." And here once again, let's just pause. Paul is doing something that shows a lot of audacity. Now, he had already acknowledged in verses 12 through 14, he's not yet perfect, but he's saying, nevertheless, to other followers of Christ, follow my example, follow my pattern of pursuing growth, pursuing Christ-like development and Christ-like deeds and so forth. He says, you can watch me and you can follow me. Now that's a lot of audacity, but that's the model of Christian maturity that we ought to be pursuing. We ought to be able to say, particularly to those that are new believers, hey, just stick around me, watch the things I do, watch the habits I have, watch the way, I make commitments to things that are truly valuable and important. I make commitments to be in church and to be involved and to be serving and to be giving. Commitments to studying God's Word and drawing near to Him and praying and so forth and serving. So we ought to be able, progressively in our Christian walk, to say, look at my example. I'm not yet perfect, but here's some things that you would do well to copy. Paul says, follow my example. He goes on, he says, and even watch other people who are following that pattern. Again, look at the emphasis on actual conduct and character transformation. Verse 18. Now he's going to change gears slightly. He says, for I have often told you before, and now say again, even with tears, many, that's unfortunate, he says many and not a few, many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Now, that's kind of a tough thing to understand. What does he mean, enemies of the cross of Christ? Let's pause. The cross of Christ was the ultimate revelation of the heart of God. It was meant to completely demolish our fear and our distrust of God. It was meant to reveal that God is altogether sacrificially loving and good and trustworthy. And the cross of Christ was also to break the power of sin in our life, because we go from distrusting our Creator to trusting Him. Now we also trust Him when He says that He wants to save us from the things that are truly wrecking us and wrecking our society, which is sin. Again, Matthew 1:21, they will call Him Jesus because He'll save His people from their sins. So the cross of Christ is meant to break the power of sin in my life. I go from distrusting Christ to trusting Him. I go from thinking sin is, not a big deal, to realizing, oh my goodness, sin is sand in the internal machinery of every human being as well as in the social fabric of humanity. So he's saying there's certain individuals, the cross is not having the influence on them it was meant to have. Now he's going to explain it more explicitly in verse 19. He says, verse 19, their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach. I'll elaborate on that. It's a little bit of an unusual phrase. And their glory is in their shame. Now the key is the last phrase. Their mind is on earthly things. So he starts out by saying in verse 18, they're the enemies of the cross of Christ. Here he says their destiny is destruction. Their God is their stomach, and their glory is in their shame. Their mind is on earthly things. Paul is talking about individuals who are associating themselves with the Christian community. He's talking about individuals that may identify as Christians, but he says they are not living as Christians. The cross of Christ, the full revelation of God, has not influenced them the way it is meant to. It has not broken the power of sin in their life. They are not a heavenly minded people. They are not living by heavenly protocols. They're still earthbound. They're still living driven by self-preservation and self-gratification. That's what he meant when he said their stomach is their God. He didn't mean their stomach. It was literally their inner desires are still what governs their conduct. They're just living to gratify their desires. So he's saying these people are mouthing that they are Christ followers, but their conduct is not showing it. And in fact, they are those that are kind of ruining the influence or completely losing out on the influence that the cross of Christ was meant to have. It was meant to break the power of sin and meant to draw us with full-hearted trust toward Christ our Creator. Okay, a lot to take in for that passage, and we'll pick up tomorrow and we'll finish out chapter 3. Thank you.